So, good evening, ladies. Good evening, all, and welcome to the session today on finance for the non-finance startup or finance for everyone. So, before I welcome the speaker, I have a couple of important things that I need to discuss. One is that if you need to post any, ask any questions, please feel free to use a chat. And the second thing is please mute yourself so that the speaker is not disturbed while he's presenting. He will spend quite a bit of time towards the end of the presentation answering any questions that you may have. So feel free to use the chat option. And he will be, it's an interactive session. He'll be asking you a bunch of questions. So feel free to, send your replies as quickly as possible. Maybe he has some gifts for us we don't know about for the best reply. So let's keep it very interactive. Let's keep it informative. And I would like to now introduce the speaker. So Deepak's dad, and this is dating myself, this Deepak's dad, George Korah, and I've known each other for nearly 16 years. He's a very close family friend. And he's a fellow member at my dad's and brother's Rotary Club of Cochin. And George was also the first person to guide us when we moved from the US to India to start an IT offshore center for an American IT company in 2005. So that's 16 years ago, 16, 17 years ago. So it is indeed a pleasure today to meet Deepak Korah, today's speaker. He's a partner at Korah & Korah, a firm based out of Kochi, where he manages both indirect taxation and startup compliance practice. Little bit background about his schooling. He did his schooling from the Choice School to Putra. His BCom honors is at St. Xavier's College, Calcutta. He earned his CA in 2019 and he joined Korah & Korah as manager taxation. Deepak's flair for public speaking, his ability to communicate complex topics in an easy to understand manner has made him a popular speaker and a contributing writer on complicated topics like GST and cryptocurrency. And FYI, ladies and entrepreneurs who are here today, please follow and subscribe to his YouTube channel called Connecting Minds, where he presents similar topics in a manner that I could easily understand. I mean, today I listened to both his 15-minute video on income tax and the 7-minute video on cryptocurrency, and I actually understood what he was saying. So it's a real easy to understand. He explains it so well without getting into unnecessary details or diversion. So it's again YouTube channel called Connecting Minds. So Deepak, welcome to today's session. We are all startup entrepreneurs in the audience. We look forward to learning about everything related to cash flow, equity, and valuation. Over to you.
Right. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Revati, for that lovely introduction. I am grateful. I am indeed excited to take this session and interact with all of you. Don't picture me as a startup guru or a startup mentor or anything of that sort, because one, it makes me feel a bit old. I'm just in my 20s still, and B, I'm not an entrepreneur, and I do not have a startup. I do not operate a startup, but I've got the opportunity to sort of advise many startups on how to raise funds from investors. So picture me as your friendly next door guy giving or trying to give you some kind of a financial advice for you to seek the right funds for your startup. At the outset, I want to thank Thai Kerala and kudos to them as well in bringing this good initiative called Thai Women, which is aimed at empowering women entrepreneurs and creating a space for them to showcase their mettle. And this is much appreciated. Right. So I'll straight away share my screen. So just give me a moment while I do that. Right. I hope you can share. I hope you can see the screen. I have some slides for you, and you can see this cursor, which will probably be helpful for you to, go through the text as and when I point it. Right. So the topic for the day is finance for the startup entrepreneur. And my aim is to make it as simplified as possible. That is what the aim is. But before we do a deep dive, it is quite important for us to understand. It is quite important for us to understand as to what should be the takeaways from this particular session. There's this person by the name Fitzhugh Dodson, who was a famous American psychologist. Now, what he said was, without goals and plans to reach them, you are like a ship which has set sail with no destination. Now, this is plain English, but it's very meaningful. Whatever you do, you need to find the objective. Otherwise, what will happen is life will not be meaningful for you, it will not be exciting. So in this particular session, women entrepreneurs being the participants, you must ask yourself, what is the objective? What are the takeaways from this session? Because otherwise, you'll be just wasting your 1.5, 2 hours listening to me and not garnering anything from this particular session. Now, in office, what I do is when I delegate work to the associates, I ask them that, this is the objective. You must formulate an audit query if anything comes up with the client. So this is your objective, and therefore you raise or you do some kind of a background work to reach that audit query. So always have the objective in mind, because if you have a goal and if you have a plan to reach the goal, then like I said, life will be more meaningful and exciting throughout. Enough of the philosophy, I'll just start and begin with. This slide probably gives you a bird's eye view of the different topics I would cover. Some I will do a deep dive, some I will just touch upon for knowledge purposes. First, we will discuss the main differentiator between a business and a startup. Now, many of you would think that there's hardly any difference between the two, right? Business means a startup, but no, there is a stark difference, and we will discuss about that. A business plan. Well, all of you know, attending the session, that a sound business plan is required for you to search the right funding from the investors for your startup. Because a shoddy business plan is not going to get you anywhere. So why having a sound, good, meaningful business plan is important is what we will also discuss in this session. The next segment, we will do a deep dive into funding. Of course, what are the sources of funding? But before that, why do you need funds? Like, again, search for the objective. Why do you need funds? Then what are the different sources of funds? It could be right from borrowing money from your dad one day till that day when you ring the bell at the stock exchange when going for an IPO. So there could be a lot of different sources of funding, but we'll discuss for a startup generally what are the sources. And thirdly, it is the stages of funding and types of investors. Because as a startup, you need to analyze as to which stage you belong to, and then seek the funding which is relevant to that stage. Because if a startup is in the scaling stage, there's no point in bootstrapping. If a startup is in the incubation stage, there's no point going for a VC or an angel investor. So according to the stage of operation for the startup, you have to search for the funding. Next, we will jump to what an investor looks at. Now, from an investor's point of view, like what he sees. So what are the basic items that you should prepare? What is the toolkit or a checklist that you should have before you go to the investors? And when you approach the investors, what could be the common questions that they'll ask? So we'll deal with the revenue model and the sales and the projections and all that, the cash flow, the break-even, all that, while taking this topic. And then we'll touch upon some important items and stuff that you really should consider in your business plan, where we deal with ratios and key metrics, measure the performance of your goods and services, right? That's why you use key metrics or ratios. Projections and valuations. Well, how do you justify valuation to a particular investor, right? What are the different methods of projections? How do you prepare a projection? You really need the help of a consultant to prepare projections? All that we will discuss when we get to this area. And finally, why comparison is actually good for a startup. Now, in my personal opinion, comparing yourself, your strengths and weaknesses with a fellow human being will only make you narrow-minded. It will not take you anywhere. You'll go through that single path where the other person is also going through. You tend to not you tend to avoid a lot of opportunities that come knocking, and you really cannot think out of the box if you are comparing with others. But my theory and logic will not apply in the startup world, because at different stages of funding, different stages of valuation, different stages of growth, a startup must compare with its peers, with its competitors in the market. Because ultimately, you are looking for that market share percentage. And on that, the investors invest. And finally, some common mistakes, some common pitfalls that you can avoid while making your business plan and pitching before the investors from a financial point of view. So we will discuss all this. But before that, a tidbit of motivation. I was told I'll take up the questions either during or after the session. But anyways, I have a few questions to ask, and it'll be really grateful if you can use the chat option and post your answers to the questions that I'll ask. So the first question, of course, is which is Kerala's first unicorn startup? By the way, what is a unicorn? Any responses? What is a unicorn? Okay, let me just open that. Yes, Naureen, $1 billion valuation. A billion means how many rupees? Yes, it's the correct answer. Unicorn means the 1 billion valuation. What does 1 billion in INR stand? 100 crores, right? So what is 1 billion USD in INR? If you take today's exchange rate, it is roughly 7,897.7 crores. Mind-boggling, 7,800 crores. So any guesses which is Kerala's first unicorn startup? Good. It's not a, it's, yes, it is a fintech startup. And it is open. Yes, I got a few answers. Open Financial Technologies, as simple as it is, otherwise known as open. Recently, these guys got entry into the elite list of India's top 100 unicorns. They started at the Kerala Startup Mission, KSUM, where the Kerala government invested around 2 crores into their startup. And now they have crossed 7,900 and 897 crores. Right, from 2 crores to 7,000. So you can imagine Kerala government's investment worth right now. These guys, what they do, they provide neo-banking solution. What is neo-banking? Digital banking without a physical presence. They provide neo-banking services to SMEs, small and medium enterprises. Like all of you have personal finance apps and all. I personally use an app called Money Lover. It will track my daily expenses, my monthly income, my debt, etc. So similarly, a personal finance app for a business that it was created and is being created by Open. Recently, they bagged a $15 million investment from IIFL Finance, which is headquartered in Bombay. And because of their service delivery, they have partnered with 15 banks, the likes of HDFC, Kotak, ICICI, and all that. But forget about all this. The fact is that out of these 4 co-founders, 2 are women entrepreneurs. All from Kerala, of course. 2 are women entrepreneurs. And they have shown that they have started from Kerala and they have entered India's elite list of 100 unicorns. So the reason why I brought out this example is to let you know that it is possible. It's not just in the books or in print. It is possible. Right. So having said all this and having given you a glimpse and a bird's eye view of what all we'll discuss throughout the course of this session and for the next 1.5 hours, we will now begin in detail. What is the difference between a business and a startup? The difference lies in idea and innovation, 2 words. A business is something that is started on an existing platform, existing delivery, existing line of goods and services, existing delivery of services. People do business to be self-employed. I do business to be self-employed. In fact, India has so many small businesses that the intent of people is to be self-employed and slightly grow. Whereas a startup, on the other hand, is evolved out of an idea, is centered around the innovation of goods and services, and they have the capacity to flourish, grow, scale into the future. So tomorrow, if you are the investor and you have ample money and you want to invest in startup in companies, in which will you start up? Will you invest in a business or a startup? Of course, into a startup, because as an investor, you realize their true growth potential, and you want the startup. You realize that they have an idea and an innovation, and that's why they are called a startup. And the startup can scale, can expand, can grow, can flourish. And that's why 90% of India's businesses are not fundable, because startups attract investors, not businesses. To draw the point home, let us take the case of an example. You have two companies, Carvale and EVM. Carvale, as most of you know, Carvale.com is a startup, or was a startup probably. What they do is that they provide online delivery of, they are an online platform, right? They provide information on what cars to buy and what cars to sell and all that. They connect the end customer to the local automobile dealer. What does the EVM group in Kerala do? One of the largest automobile groups in Kerala. What do those guys do? They directly approach the customer, sometimes through Carvale and other platforms as well. Now, what happens here is that if you are an investor, and let's assume Carvale and EVM group came together, right? Let's assume that they formed at the same year. In which company would you invest? Would you invest in Carvale or the EVM group? Of course, Carvale. Why? Because this particular company has the potential to even tap the international markets, because they're online, and online is the game. Online is the business today, as I speak. EVM group, yes, they have a huge business profile, but the fact is that they'll be able to grow probably to the south of India and to the other parts of India, but not beyond that. But because Carvale is an online platform, they have a high potential to flourish, scale, and even grow. And that is why, as an investor, investors would be they would be more attracted to invest in Carvale.com. Now, speaking about online business, suddenly it came to my mind that across the years 2020, 21, and 22, there were 5 types of startups which flourished like crazy. You had the educational technology, the edtech, be it the likes of Byju's and Unacademy, and the recent admit Physics Wala. You had financial technology firms, fintech, be it the likes of Paytm, Cred, and even ClearTax, which is a major competitor to us chartered accountants. Then you have food delivery, right? You have food delivery and agro business, which even, Swiggy and Zomato, the two names that come to your mind, but there are other food aggregators also that are slowly coming up and gaining the market share. So food aggregators came up during the last 3 years. And then you had online business, online gaming business. In fact, during different seasons of IPL and during COVID, there were so many online business companies that flourished across the period of 3 years, right? And finally, content creation. If you open YouTube, you'll find a lot of people gaining 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, 20 million subscribers, thereby building a cult, thereby building a community, and they build a business around it, and various other platforms as well. So content creation is also a thriving business. Coming to a good business plan. Now, a business plan is something that should help you to start, structure, manage, run, grow. SSMRG. Start, structure, manage, run your business, and grow your business. The business plan should be good, it should be sound, it should be meaningful, because a shoddy business plan is not going to get you anywhere. It should help you seek the right funding, right? You should be able to get the right funding and bring in new partners as well. In fact, a sound business plan should communicate to you They're putting your blood, sweat, and money in the and your effort and time into your company, into your startup is worthwhile. A business plan can be of two types. You can have a traditional business plan. You can have a lean startup business plan. Normally, what we see in the market is a traditional business plan. It is a BP which is quite detailed, runs into pages, right? You have a breakup of each and everything. If you take, let's say, market share, you have a calculation to arrive at the market share. So it is a more detailed form because some investors out there require a more detailed version of a business plan. A lean startup business plan, on the other hand, is highly focused, summarized, and only runs into 1 or 2 pages. An elevator pitch, for example. And nowadays, this is the trend because some guys don't have time. You see, for example, if a producer is going or a director is going to pitch a movie to the actor. Now, the actor, assuming he is a famous one, does not have time to go through all the 200 pages of the script. He will ask for a synopsis. Similarly, the investor will ask for a synopsis. So if you ask me which business plan to prepare, in my opinion, you should have a combination, probably have both traditional business plan and a lean business plan. Because there are investors, there are different types of investors sitting across the table. Some will require detailed one, some a very summarized, highly focused one. Now, I'm not going into the depth of the various components of a business plan because what will otherwise happen is that this will be like a 4 or 5 hour session. So I hope this is already taken during your mentoring sessions, or if not, it will be taken. But I have one particular point out of these components of a BP that I'll address, that is projected financials at the end of the presentation. So in short, your business plan should not be vague, right? As I said, it should be something that is a reflection of your blood, sweat, and money, and your time and effort which is put into your company. Whether it's worthwhile or not, that should be the reflection of a business plan. So therefore, it should not be incomplete. Coming into the next segment, which is quite important, that is funding. Now here we will deal with 3 aspects. Why do you need funds? What are the different sources of funds? And at which stage of your startup you need funding? Now, refer back to the slide where I quoted Fitzhugh Dodson. What he said is you should set sail. I mean, the ship should set sail with a destination. Otherwise, you are going ahead meaningless, without a goal, and if a goal, without a plan. So the first question that the investor will ask you when you pitch your plan to him or her is that, why do you need my money? Right. Okay. You are asking for 7.5 CR, 7.5 crores, but why do you need it? Definitely, you'll have a breakup of the money that you need. Let's say 7.5 CR, you divide 7.5 CR into 3. 2.5 CR will go to inventory, 2.5 will go into machinery, and 2.5 will take care of your payroll, your marketing, your sales, and advertising. So you need to understand where you're splitting up or how you will split up this the money that is coming into the investors. And this is, I would say, the first question the investors would ask you. So definitely for any business, prototype creation and product development, in other words, research and development takes a huge chunk of the invested money because you need to develop the idea, the product, or the product around that idea. And to do this work, you need talent, you need staff, you need managerial as well as technical staff. To put a roof under them, you need office space. Now, in today's scenario, what is happening is startups, even without cashing in any revenue, they go for these swanky offices. I don't find the logic in that, okay? Because in my opinion, I don't think an investor will invest in you looking at your office, right? So have a minimal sort of an infrastructure just to house your talent, to house your human resources. Working capital, definitely for your day-to-day operations. Raw materials and equipment, if you are a capital intensive or if you're dealing with goods, of course you need to manage your raw materials. You need to buy, you need to take stock of your inventory, be it finished products or WIP or whatever, and also buy the required equipment. You also need money, a major chunk for it, for advertising, because nowadays you need to, you can't keep a low profile. You need to show yourself in the markets. Therefore, advertising, sales, expenditure comes into picture. In addition to all this, you still have licenses, you still have certification costs, you still have fees that you pay to be consultants, right? So funding from investors should take care of all this. And therefore, you need to understand why you need this funds so that you will segregate, you will have a rough plan in your head that out of 7.5 CR, 1, 2, 3, I will divide it and then I'll be happy. So the investor also knows that you have a clear breakup of the funds that he is putting it into your startup. Coming into the sources of funds. Now, before I do a deep dive into the various sources, it's quite relevant to understand what are the two major divisions of fund sources. You have equity financing and you have debt financing. Equity financing, in simple words, means diluting your stake, your equity share capital. Now, what is equity dilution? I got a question, and I'm quite sure that many of you don't understand what equity dilution means, right? It means losing your control. Let's say you and your mother started the company, which is a startup. You invested 9,000 shares, your mother invested 1,000 shares. So total capital is 10K, 10,000. What is your stake? 90%. Tomorrow you found a friend, your investor, but he's saying that I will put in money, but I want 2,000 of your shares. Okay, so you give him 2,000 number of shares, and now you have 12,000, 10,000 plus 2, 12,000 shares. Now you can't keep issuing shares. There's this concept called authorized share capital and paid up share capital. You will have to fix your authorized share capital, let's say 1 crore or 2 crore or 3 crore, and then play with your paid up share capital to that extent. You can't go berserk and you can't go and issue 10 crores and 5 crores and 20 crores of share capital. No. You need to be under the limits that is decided at the time when you incorporate your startup legally. So coming back to the example, the investor has 2,000 shares. Now you have 9,000. You still have 9,000. Your mother still has 1,000. But what has happened is your stake has reduced by 15%. What was 90 is now 75. So if you bring people on board, yes, you'll get the money. Your bank account will get credited by that investor's money, but you will lose a portion of your stake, your control, your capital. And that is equity dilution. Coming back, equity financing, in simple words, as I said, is equity dilution, selling a portion of the company in return for the capital payment from the investor. But the fact is that the advantage is that you don't have a headache in this because, see, unlike a loan, unlike debt financing, you don't have to pay interest. You can sleep peacefully. There's no month and quarter and year end interest payments. The return that investors will want is ROI, the capital growth for the money that they put in your startup, because they're equity investors, not debt investors. Examples could be angel investors, venture capital. These guys usually ask for a stake of your capital. Crowdfunding, incubators, even self-financing family and friends, like close family, cousins who really like you will not ask for stake, but otherwise they'll ask for a portion of your equity share capital. Coming to debt financing, it's the opposite of equity financing. It's basically inviting funds, but in return giving interest. Banks, NBFCs, certain government loans. In fact, if you go to a bank called Kerala Bank, right, for startup entrepreneurs, I was reading this yesterday, for startup entrepreneurs, they have a lower rate of return, a low rate of interest, sorry. And they have some terms and conditions that your project value should be so and so, you should scale within so many years and all that. So that comes with a cost. It's not free. The government is not giving you a grant. If you approach these local corporation banks, then you'll get a lower rate of interest loan. So these come with a cost because the return for them is the interest that you pay. There's a deadline involved because you can't sleep peacefully. You'll always have this thing in your mind that you have to pay off interest, right? So, but the good part of this is that they will not involve too much in your business. Equity financiers, what they'll do, they'll because they have a stake in your business, They will deal with the day-to-day operations, whereas debt financiers don't. They are just bothered about the monthly, quarterly, yearly interest payments that you pay them. You have banks, NBFCs, government loans, and some VC venture capitals also do debt funding. So let's deal with all these examples. We have now understood what are the two segregations of sources. Right now, let's look into each type. Sources of funds. So here you have, this is just an illustrative list. Like I told you, you can borrow from your dad, from your wife, from your husband. There is no problem. But ideally for a startup, these are the sources of funds. You have the first three: customer, own funds, friends, and family. Now, you can let me know, can a startup become a unicorn without funding? Any responses? I see the chat box a bit empty. Can a startup become a unicorn without funding? Okay. Naureen is quite active. Yes, no, yes, no. Definitely yes. And you have the example here. Zoho. I'm sure all of you would have heard about Zoho. They became a unicorn without angel, VC, crowdfunding, incubation, all that. A company based out in Chennai. What they did is they started the company with the co-founder's own money. We'll come to bootstrapping later. The technical term is called bootstrapping. He pumped in money from his own pocket. But what he did is he had a fantastic idea. And he sold the idea. The customers realized that a burning problem had been resolved, and they invested in it, which means they subscribed to his platform. So he pumped in money from his own funds. He created a good product, and customers liked it. They bought it. Revenue came in. Automatically, this guy became a unicorn. Zoho became a unicorn. For information, Zoho is a platform which provides accounting solutions. Right? They have this platform called Zoho Books, where small business, if QuickBooks is for US, Zoho is for India. That's what people say. And I personally use Zoho in my office, and I'm a big fan of their platform. So these guys have raised money. I think there are one or two co-founders. Yeah, they raised money from their own pockets, and what they did is they built a beautiful product with which they could sell. They could tap the Indian market. So customer revenue came in. Probably they had a few friends and family to support them monetarily, and with the customer backing, with own funds, and with friends and family, they became a unicorn. So yes, it is highly possible that with the first three sources of funding, you can definitely become a unicorn. There's no doubt. It is difficult in today's world. Zoho is no longer a startup. Okay, it's been some years since they came into the scenario. It is difficult in today's scenario, but it is possible, very much. But exploring the other sources of funding, you have crowdfunding. Now, speaking about just coming back, speaking about own funds, Kotak Mahindra Bank, one such example. Yes, Kotak, Mr. Kotak borrowed from his friends and family. I think he started with 1 lakh, and now there was a time when he surpassed 100 crores. Long back. Now it's much more than that. So how Kotak was formed? From his own pocket? No, from friends and family. He would have probably put in some money, a very negligible amount, but from friends and family, they pulled in and they built Kotak. Crowdfunding. Now, this is now gaining popularity. Crowdfunding is basically something where it's a process wherein you collect small amounts of money from a large number of people. Say 1,000, 500, 2,000, 3,000 rupees you collect, and then you build a pool. You can invest the pool into your startup. Earlier, it was done physically, but now everything is online. In fact, you have Catapult, which is a famous crowdfunding platform. You go there, you start a campaign, you probably enter the details of your startup, you submit your pitch, a video, probably, and then you start a campaign, people will give in money. The beauty about this is that for crowdfunding, they will not ask for your equity share capital, right? So there's no control to lose, but people should contribute. That is one example of crowdfunding. Then you have angel investors. As the name suggests, these are guys who come as angels. When you have an idea, when you have formulated the idea, but you are in search of revenue. It is that stage where you look at angel investors when you have not garnered that much of revenue. Right? Angel investors, they could come in to invest anything between 50 lakhs to 1 CR, 2 CR, 3 CRs. Okay, so these guys, they believe in the high potential of the startup. Revenue is not there, fine, but they know that the startup will go on to the next stage. The startup will have the potential to grow and scale much larger. In fact, our very own Kerala Angel Network, CAN, is one such example. Now, CAN, if I was going through the website, CAN in fact provides assistance in the form of angel investments from 50 lakhs to 3.6 CR. But they give a timeline. You should be scalable within 2 to 5 years and so on. You have India's biggest angel investment network. You have IAN, you have Chennai Angel Network, you have the Mumbai Angel Network. So these are basically communities. You can go for events, seminars, and all that. Present your pitch. If the idea is good, if the innovation is there, if you have already formulated the idea, even though you have not created any revenue, you still can get angel investments. Coming to venture capital investors. Now here, you cannot seek a VC funding without having revenue. That's the fact. Idea should be there, definitely. It should be formulated. Your product or service should be in the market. You should start getting revenue and negligible profit. Only then will you be open to the spectrum of VCs, venture capital. Because these guys are professionally set up investment firms and companies that will have many filters for investing into your startup. They will either have a filter as sectoral filters, I will only invest in these sectors, or they will say that this is my bandwidth, between 10 CR and 100 CR I will invest, or they will say that this is the idea that they're looking for and I will invest in this idea. So VCs are professionally run firms, right? So you need to sort of fulfill the checklist before you go to VC funding. An example could be our very homegrown Bangalore-based Kalari Capital. In fact, Kalari, they invested into Myntra, into Snapdeal, into Urban Ladder, Vazirex, all unicorns. Okay, and it's a local VC funding firm. Incubators, accelerators, well, this comes in the initial stage, in the ideation stage of the startup. Now, they are very unique. They are organizations which give you the platform for setting up, right? They bring along with them a list of value-added services. They'll give you the space. They'll give you the mentorship required from experts. They'll give you the funding also. And that is how Open Financial Technologies, the first unicorn from Kerala, sought 2 crore investments from KSUM, and now they've become a unicorn. That's their story. So incubators is very helpful at the initial stage when you have probably exhausted your own funds and friends and family funds. You go to an incubator and they will help you. And finally is the end game, the dream, ringing the bell at the stock exchange, IPO. And that is coming under the exit option. A famous example of an incubator I missed out from saying, that is yes, Kerala Startup Mission. I was mentioning about Open. IPO, a good case study is Nykaa. I was reading about Nykaa 2 days back, and they have a beautiful story. Again, the face behind Nykaa is a women entrepreneur. She is an ex-investment banker. She realized that there's so many inconsistencies in online delivery of beauty and cosmetic products. And therefore, she, along with her husband, found something called as Nykaa, which which was small initially, which was built over the various stages of startup funding. And finally, sometime in November, within a span of just 9 years, her company got listed. She came in with a share price of 1,023 rupees. Before listing and after listing, it was 2,000, almost double. And people were very happy. They were oversubscribing to her shares. Today, Nykaa is valued at $14 billion. And the sole reason for this growth of Nykaa is the face behind it. She is also a women entrepreneur. Again, an example to tell you that it is possible. Falguni Nair, yes. So having detailed the sources of startup and the sources of funds, and the need why you should invite funds for your startup, we will now go into the third aspect, right? The stages of the startup. Now here, I'll spend some time because it's very important to understand to which investor you should approach, depending upon the operation level you are in right now. Now, there are multiple sources of funding available for startups. The funding should be dependent on the operational level of your startup. And trust me, this funding, extraction of funds from investors is not an easy process, it's not a cakewalk. Even crowdfunding will take a minimum of 6 months, let alone angel investments and venture capital and all that. So it's not a very easy process, it takes time, right? Because there's a lot of compliance, a lot of documentations also involved in this. So you have from ideation stage right to the IPO stage. Now, how I can relate these levels is to a Formula One race. I'm an ardent fan of Formula One motor racing, and in Formula One, which basically takes place in the UK, you have different levels of motor racing to reach Formula One, because Formula One has the elite list of drivers. You start with go-karting, you qualify, you go to Formula 3 or Formula E for that matter, which is the electric version. You go to Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula 1. And that is when you compete with the big daddies there in motor racing. So what I'm trying to tell you is that you have different stages of startup funding, right from ideation stage till the IPO, till the exit stage. And when you start up, definitely you should have the exit option in your mind. Exit doesn't mean that you're winding up and going back home, no, and traveling the world, no. It means either are you looking for an IPO, are you looking for a merger acquisition or distressed sale? What is your plan in the next 15, 20, 30, 40 years? Coming to the ideation stage, I was talking about bootstrapping, injection of money from your own pocket. Quite simple, less risky, because at this stage, the amount of funds necessity is quite less. Okay, you can think of informal sources, friends and family funding is also connected to this. This is where the startup should ideally start off with own funds. Now, what happens is, I've observed, many startups tell me, many of my friends tell me that, I have this idea, I want to formulate it, and I want to go for funding. But how do you know you want to go for funding even before you've incorporated the company for the startup? No, that's the wrong approach. You need to realize that, like I told you in the case of Zoho, that you can build this startup for 5 to say 7 years with your own funds, with customer backing, with friends and family, and then look for funding. You should not start something tomorrow saying that the second day I will go for funding. No. Bootstrapping is the common source, what people do initially. And then later, when your idea is successful, right, when you really think, and when people around you also think that this is scalable, is flourishable, and is growable, that's when you look for funding. Okay, so ideation stage is the first one, where you can use informal channels for raising funds. Then you have the validation stage. Now, this is where your idea has become formulated, and you have found out a potential demand for the product or service. That means you have built the product, MVP, a minimal viable product, and you have put it for beta testing, and you're sort of analyzing the demand. Here, the funding, what people call the seed funding, to help you sow the seeds. So the incubators can come into picture. Government loans, you have government loans like SIDBI, like Startup Seed Finance from the government of India. You have several loans like that coming in. You have angel investors also coming in, because some angel investors, like I told you, they don't look at revenue. They look at the idea, they look at the MVP, and they invest. Crowdfunding, definitely. If that platform finds you eligible to start a campaign, they will invite you. The next stage is early traction stage. Now, this is the middle part, right? Ideation is over, idea is over, validation is over, demand is analyzed, early traction. You have placed your product or your service into the market, and now you are analyzing the performance when compared to others. And that is where ratios, your ROI and your GP and your NP ratios come into picture. That is why your key metrics, right, which we'll deal with later part of the session, come into picture. And this is Series A funding, the first level of big funding. And you have VCs coming in, because at this stage, you have started to get revenues, maybe losses or negligible profits. So therefore, banks and NBFCs will look at you, will look at your PL balance sheet, and they will provide some kind of funding. That is the early traction stage, Series A funding. And then there is scaling stage. Now here, you have Series B, C, D, E going up to Z. Okay, more VC funds coming into picture, because there are some structured, very professionally run VCs who have these criteria that I was telling you. They probably look at those startups that have a high growth potential. The startup may have a potential to grow, but VCs, they look at startups which are already growing and even have the potential to grow more. You have private equity firms coming to picture. What is a private equity firm? A firm that invests or asks for your equity share capital of the company which is not yet listed, right? If it's listed, you go for the IPO. That's when private equity firms come into picture, right? So at this stage, you are experiencing fast growth, and you even want to grow higher. You even want to scale higher, and that is why you look for Series B, C, D, E funding. And finally, you come to the exit stage. That is the elite stage, the Formula One race, where you rub shoulders with the biggies, right? Already companies like Reliance and Tata and Wipro and all that have done this. They've reached this. At this stage, you know that you have countered your worth investing in, and therefore you are able to tap the international market. That is why you need more capital, more funding, because if you need to go berserk and you need to go abroad, then you need funding, right? And that is when your shares in your private limited company is now offered for subscription to the general public, and therefore your private limited company now becomes the public limited company, and a price is set through valuation for that equity share. Okay, that is the IPO stage. You can also talk about mergers and acquisitions, right? Tomorrow, if an investor is asking you what is an exit option, it need not be an IPO. Right? There are so many founders, so many startups who hold the idea close to their heart. They say, I don't want to sell this. I don't want to go for an IPO. I want to run this till it takes me. And maybe they will look at an acquisition. Maybe they'll look at a merger. Right? IPO is like the final stage, of course. But if you really want to sell your business, you have a competitor who's looking to absorb your business, then you should look at mergers and acquisitions. And of course, the distress sale also comes into picture. So these are the different stages of investment. You have the ideation stage, the validation, early traction, Series A, scaling, Series B and onwards, and exit. Coming to the next segment, we have how to approach your investors. Now, this is quite, again, very important, and something I forgot to mention to you last time is that I can't help but give you some secrets on how to approach your investors. Probably this will help you to win that $1 cash prize, $1 lakh cash prize, sorry, of which you can send me the 5% commission. I'm just joking. There's no commission for this webinar. So, but I will tell you 6 points that you should keep in mind to prepare your toolkit and how to approach your investor. For any investor, he will pump in money because he wants a right to your profit, right? They are asking for a stake in your company because they want a right to your profits. Now, you may have losses. So maybe an angel investor is investing, but what he sees is that 5 years down the line, this company is going to make profits and he'll get a return. If the company is going to make a loss, even he loses money. So an investor is putting in money into the company with the hope that it's going to generate profits and they will get their return back from the investment that they put. Normally, an investor looks at 4 things, right? And these 4 things is a must. If you have not done your background work on these 4 things, you really must do and perfect it in your pitch. They will look at the management team. I don't know if you've heard about TrueJet. TrueJet, I've seen a few flights of TrueJet. They came in with the ambition to compete with Indigo, TrueJet. So I was reading about TrueJet, and what I came to know is that TrueJet's founder, he has a background in entertainment. He was a disco jockey, a DJ. And one fine day, because he has money, he has started an airline business. Now, would you invest in that business? I mean, if he has co-founders who have experience in airline, you would. But this guy has come from a music background and he's starting an airline business. Definitely not. Team matters. Your management team, their background definitely matters for a rational investor, for a knowledgeable investor. Idea, market, opportunity. These are 3 things on which a startup is built. You have an idea, and that is why you're called a startup. You have a market to counter. Okay, when I talk about market, you need to really calculate what is the percentage of market share that you'll absorb. And definitely the investor sees the opportunity in that. You should communicate to the investor that, hey, look, I have an opportunity built in. So team, idea, market, and opportunity are the broad factors, which I would say the first few items that the investor would look at in your business pitch when you pitch to the investor. In addition to this, there are 6 other points that I would like to detail and deliberate on. First one, as I said, having an idea is good, but the idea should already be formulated. Now, I got the brochure of Thai women, and I saw the criteria for sending an application. It said, idea nurturing ventures are not entertained. They are not allowed, which means what? You have not yet formulated your idea. Everyone has an idea. Today, when I see a problem, I have an idea to think of a solution. But it's so difficult on the ground to formulate that idea, to action out the idea. Okay, everyone has an idea, but it's so difficult to put that idea into action. So, first thing is, if you're looking for even a basic investment, you need to have that idea formulated. Second, you need to be profitable. Recommended, yes. Better to be profitable. What is profit? Sales minus cost, revenue minus expenses is your profit. So if you're profitable, automatically you'll be cash positive. Now, what is cash positive? It means you are able to maintain a reserve. Why? Because you are profitable. So it's like a chain. Sales is high, profit is high. Profit is high, cash is high. Cash is high, you're able to break even and go beyond. Of course, when you make a profit, you're able to break even and go beyond. So definitely you should be profitable, because the chances of getting the investment, if you're profitable, is high. Now, it's not that every startup every startup need not be profitable. I'll come to this later. But even in India today, the food delivery apps, okay, they are highly valued, but they're still making losses. The investors have invested into them based on some other criteria, not because of losses. But it is recommended that you make profits, right? And then approach investors, at least in the initial years. Secondly, it is basically have to think about your exit option. Okay. Uh, like I said, when you approach investors, you need to understand, you need to communicate to them as to what is your ultimate goal. Do you want a merger acquisition to take place? Do you want IPO to take place? Do you want a distressed sale? What is the purpose is what they are looking at. Then it is make your MVP prototype. Well, MVP is minimum viable prototype. Again, a qualification criteria for uh, Thai women. MVP is a product which is in the beta testing phase. You are putting out the product to find the initial feedback from the customer, with which you will develop, you will iterate, you will do more research and development and bring out the final product into the market. So you need to have an MVP, and the MVP should be released into the market. At least your beta testing should be done, and that is why before you approach investors, your beta testing is a must. I mean, you should have that MVP in picture. That prototype, you should have it ready. Sales forecast and cash flow positive. Of course, the chances of getting investment is quite high, because when you have revenue coming in, right, and when you project initial years, you have revenue coming in, and then when you project it for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years, then what will happen is the investors will be quite happy. They will witness your growth, and chances of getting the investment is quite high. Now, in addition to this, I had two questions.
Deepak, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Could you also let our startup entrepreneurs know why it is important to have a private limited company? It's one of the, again, the qualifying criteria. If not now, but by the time they go to the pitch competition, the finals in December, they have to have a private limited company. Thanks.
Sure.
I forgot to mention that in our list.
Sure, sure. So this is a question that I normally get. Should I go for a LLP, or should I remain as a proprietorship? Should I go for a private limited company, or should I just stay low and think about it later? So the benefit of you incorporating a private limited company initially is that you get more business. To put in simple words, big players like Reliance and Tata would be looking forward to engage you if you're a private limited company, because they know that you're legally recognized. Of course, an LLP also is legally recognized, but the legal recognition for a private limited company is much more. Because when you are incorporated as a private limited company, you have chances of going for an IPO also. Later, always you can convert from an LLP to a private limited company, but initially to garner more business, right? And to sort of formalize and structure, because if I'm an investor, I will look into your compliance also, right? If suppose I am buying your company, which is a private limited company, I will look at your compliance. Now, a LLP also has some amount of compliance because it comes under the same ministry. But to put in simple words, a private limited company is more recommended because it is more structured, legally recognized, and chances of getting investment or business is quite high. Yes. So I missed out one point from this 6 points. That is, one is the third point, that is, you should definitely have growth, the growth aspect when you consider pitching to the investor. Now, I'll come to how this growth, the component of determining growth when I come to projections. But before that, you need to understand how you will grow, right? What is your percentage of growth? You can't roughly say that around 10%, around 12%, around 20%. No. You need a calculation for it, right? You need to find out how and what is the breakup. So therefore, you should have a traditional business plan to sort of break up this component of growth. Because what the investors ask you is, in 5 years' time, how will you grow? Right? So idea, which will be formulated, profit, definitely revenue, cash flow positives, exit option, and make your MVP prototype already, or you should have an MVP, you should release into the market. If you have these 6 pointers, the second one is a bit difficult, but if you have all 6, then nothing like it. You're ready to approach the investors. In addition to all this, those Four things I told you: team, idea, opportunity, market. If you have those four plus the six, these 10 pointers should be your secrets to formulate a good business plan, a good business pitch, and put forth your pitch to the investors. They should ask you less questions on this. Right. I've got two more questions. I've just put it as it is. I'll discuss as I deliberate. One is, how do you convince your investors if your product has a first mover advantage? That means you have the idea, you have the product, and you realize that this product is great. Like how Zoho realized in its initial stage that they have built a great product. How will you convince investors to invest on that product? Simple. Two things. One, you quote the market share. Definitely, if you're saying that your product has a first mover advantage, you will know the market share, calculate the market share, right? Because the investor will want to know out of the total market, what is your percent? Like Swiggy and Zomato, to your surprise, is only holding 10 and 12% of the market share. Similarly, they'll tell you what is the market share. So calculate your market share. And number two, determine your revenue model. EdTech companies nowadays have different sources of revenues. You have revenue coming in from student subscription. You have revenue coming in from private institutions or schools. You have revenue coming in from YouTube, making videos and supplying videos, even through other forums and channels. So you need to determine your revenue model, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then put forth your pitch to the investor. And that is when the guy sitting on the other table will be more willing to understand, because you already have the calculations ready. You have determined from where you get the money, and you already calculated the market shares. Therefore, he will invest in your product that has a first mover advantage. Second, how do you convince the investor to invest in something that is already existing and facing competition? Now, this is quite tricky because, like I told you earlier, competition is good. It is required, especially in the startup phase, in the startup world. So my answer to this would be, in 2 words: embrace competition, love competition. Because you see, you cannot kill your competitor. That guy will flourish if he needs to flourish. You can flourish if you need to flourish. So you need to choose your path. What is your path, and go according to that. Right? Embrace your competition, which in other words means that you tell the investor that, look, I know you told me that there's this competitor and he's doing much better business than me. Maybe after a few years, my exit option would be a merger with him. My exit option would be a sale to him, because he's the biggie, he's the bigger person. So that's why I told you, embrace competition. Because tomorrow, if he says that you have a great competition, this is not viable, it will not come up and all that, you tell him that I will make it happen, right? This is my path, this is my idea, this is my market, this is my opportunity. And my goal is to merge with this competitor, because he's a bigger person, I'm a smaller person. That's the answer to the second question. Right. Moving on to projections and valuations. We will deal with key metrics. We will deal with ratios also in this. Now, projections and valuations, I was thinking on how to explain this, because I need a pen and paper, and it's quite difficult to do this online. But I'm not putting in many figures here. This is normally done by merchant bankers and investment bankers, and even chartered accountants to some extent. So therefore, I will explain it in the way that I feel that you'll be able to understand. Now, as you can see on the screen, startup financial projections are key to securing funding. They determine the business nature, the business description, because if you don't have the figures, right, you're not going to communicate how you will achieve revenue, how you will be cash flow positive, how you will be profitable, and how you want another person to acquire you. What will be the value, right? There is a story behind Nykaa getting 1,000 rupees. There is a story behind Nykaa getting 2,000 rupees after this thing. So there is a value around it. How do you justify this value in front of the investor? You see 3 examples here, the famous ones: Byju's, Zomato, and Swiggy. 10.5 billion, I'm talking about valuation, 8.5 billion, 9 billion. But the common fact about all this is that they are still incurring heavy loss, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 crore losses. So you'll ask me, you told me in that list of 6 indicators, one of the determinants was that you should be profitable. No, in their business model, things are different. I am investing in Baidu, I am investing in Zomato, or I'm investing in Swiggy based on the number of users, on the number of app downloaders, right? That is why their valuation has gone up. That is why. So if you look at their bottom line, if you look at their profit and loss statement, okay, and if you look at their loss after tax, there's no tax of course. If you look at the final loss, you will be again mind boggled because they are incurring 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 crore loss. So the idea, the main thing behind this is that they have built a projection, right? When Baiju's probably Baiju's is not yet gone for an IPO, but they will. What the indication is that in a few years' time they will go for an IPO. Probably when they did their valuation, they would have built a 10-year, 4-year, 5-year projection, and the major criteria for determining revenue would be subscription, student users, right? They banked on that and they convinced the investor on that aspect and he invested money into that. So projections and finance valuations are quite important. It definitely should be a part of your business plan. You can refer back to that slide where I had formulated different components of a business plan. The 9th item should be projections and valuations. So there are different methods of valuing a startup. Sorry, there could be 9 methods, there could be 19 methods, there could be 99 methods. But the problem is that each method will give you a different answer. It will not give you the exact answer. It will give you a different answer, but somewhat same. Why? Because these are projections. What will happen tomorrow? No one knows. You are drawing out some assumptions, right? You are drawing out some growth factor rates and all that, and then you are drawing out the projections. How do you value? In simple words, the value of a startup is determined on the basis of the present value of future cash flows. What is cash flow? We will discuss about it. In other words, free cash flow. Ultimately, what is your cash that you get in your pocket? The present value of all that today, or today's value, is the value of the enterprise, value of the business. There could be different, as I said, different methods of valuation. It's an arbitrary process. It's not written anywhere that you should use this method or that method. Okay. In fact, our institute recommends one common method that's to be used, that's called discounted cash flow method, which we will discuss at length in the next few slides. So the value of a startup is the present value of future projections, future cash flow, right? Because otherwise you will not be able to tell your investor that 5 years, 10 years down the line, this is my value. You need workings, you need figures, you need calculations, right? And that is explained in the subsequent slides. I was telling you about discounted cash flow model. Now this is a very famous, quite simple to use method, okay, because it is quite realistic. The other methods of valuation is quite hard. It has a lot more assumptions into picture. So therefore, not many people use it. Of course, it depends on the industry. See, I may not be able to use a discounted cash flow method for Swiggy. I may not be able to use a net asset method for Baiju's, because what is the asset for Baiju's? I can use, like, if you take the example of Facebook and WhatsApp, right? Facebook acquired WhatsApp. They had an altogether different sense of valuation. They disregarded all the valuation methods, and what they did is, if WhatsApp had around 1 billion users that time when Facebook acquired, if I'm going to charge $1 per user for WhatsApp, right, for using WhatsApp, what will be the valuation of WhatsApp? Now, this is not written anywhere, from the normal methods of valuation. This is something different. So Facebook said that if I'm going to invest in you, you have to tell me how many users you have, and if I'm going to charge $1, luckily they have not started charging, but if I'm going to charge $1 per WhatsApp user, what will be your valuation? At that time, they had 1 billion into $1, $1 billion. That's the valuation. In 2 steps, they found the valuation, they signed the report. Facebook acquired WhatsApp. Simple. But the fact is that, like I said, different companies can have different methods of valuation. The common one is discounted cash flow, or we call it DCF. Now, here, what you need to understand is, I'm not able to really show you in Excel sheets and all that. Probably I will have a one-to-one mentoring session with you later. If you have any doubts, you can always come back to me. I'll show you the workings and all that. But for the purpose of today's seminar, I'll just briefly explain how to go about this valuation. So you need to have in your mind, how many years are you going to project? Are you going to project for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? My advice is that prepare projections for less than 8 years, less than 7 years. Don't go beyond that, because if you go beyond that, you will encounter more questions. Okay, and you will reach an arbitrary valuation which may not be correct. Recommended is 5 years. Build a 5-year projection, right? And then you tell the investor that this is the value that I have. So how do you start with? You have to have your audited statements. Now, many of you will be just starting this financial year, therefore audit would not be there. It's okay. You start with the unaudited. You would have definitely appointed your auditor or your consultant to audit your statements or to prepare your statements. So you have to have a base at least. For that, I told you, you should have your audited statement or your unaudited statements for year 0. That's how I call it. From year 0, if I have the base, I can extrapolate for year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Recommended up to 5. How do I do that? I have revenue for year 0. I have expenses for year 0. I can know that, okay, in year 1, how much of revenue will I grow? The consultant or the auditor will not know, right? The valuer will not know, because that's a question that he should ask you. You should have in your mind that year 1, these many users will be there in my platform. I will garner this much of revenue. So what will be that growth rate? Into so and so growth rate will be my year 2 revenue. Similarly, year 3, 4, 5, and so on. Expenses, how do you break expenses? You have 2 types of expenses. You have fixed expenses and variable. Fixed would, of course, be your rent, your machinery, right? All the items which will not vary with years passing. So that will be a fixed amount throughout. That will not change. Coming to variable, you will have your marketing, you will have your auditor's fee, you will have your your payroll, your salaries. All these are variable costs, and they are taken to be a proportion of sales. So as your sales increases, your payroll costs will also increase, because you need more hands to work on your product. Your marketing sales, your marketing expense will increase, your shipping expenses will increase, your advertising expenses will increase, because all this is a percentage of revenue. So if you're saying that your revenue is growing by 10%, your expenses also will grow either by 10% or at least grow by 5, 6, 7%. Right? Fixed expenses will remain same throughout. So once you have revenue and once you have expenses, of course, this is something I'm telling you very, very broadly. Under expenses, there are so many other heads, right? So that I can only show you in an Excel sheet. So if you deduct revenue, if you deduct expenses from revenue, and also consider tax. Coming to tax, I'm sure all of you know that for startups you have an exemption under tax, so you need not consider tax the first 3 years. Now, if you make a loss in the first 3 years, of course, there's no tax coming to picture, so you can reserve. The provision under tax is that a startup can avail in a block of 10 years for any 3 consecutive years. You can go for this tax exemption. 100% of your profits will be exempt from tax. So you have revenue projections, you have expense projections, and you know the tax. What is tax? Take it to be roughly 30% or 25% of your profit, not your revenue. Many people have the wrong notion that tax is equal to so and so percent of revenue. No. Tax is on what you make after meeting your expenses. In the first couple of years, you may incur a loss, there's no tax. In the next 3 years, you are safe because you get a tax exemption. Probably after 3 years, you'll have to counter for tax, right? And bring it into valuation. So revenue minus expenses minus the tax figure will give you profit after tax, as we call it PAT, PAT. So once you have PAT for year zero already you have, because you've already found out it's a part of your audited statements or your unaudited. Year one, you have PAT. Year two, you have PAT. 3, 4, 5, you have PAT. So you have the profit after tax. Now, what is the free cash flow? I was telling you that valuation is the present value, today's value of the future cash flow. Cash flow is not profit after tax. You need to still deduct certain items and arrive at the free cash flow. See, depreciation is a non-cash item, right? It is an expenditure. It is something that is calculated on your fixed assets. It's a non-cash item. There's no inflow, there's no outflow. It's something that your value of the asset is coming down. That's it. So you need to add back depreciation to profit after tax to make it look like you're going to deal with cash competence. You need to minus two things: capital expenditure or capex, that is your fixed asset investment, and your working capital change, closing minus opening. Why are you reducing this? Don't get confused. You're reducing this to find out what is your free cash flow, because your cash is going to be stuck in capex and working capital change, right? So from the profit after tax, you add back depreciation and you minus two elements that will block your fund. The resultant figure is free cash flow, FCF, right? So you found out the FCF of year zero, year one, up to year five. Of course, in year zero, there's no need to find, because when you take the change in working capital, it will be only in year two. So year two to year five, you have all the figures ready. Now what do? You find the discounting factor. Now I'm not going into depth on how to find the discounting factor, because you really can find out by using a formula. But in simple words, this is the percentage determined by the investor. If you give your projections to a consultant, he will tell you how to go about finding a discounting factor, because he takes so many other comparative elements into picture. He'll find the borrowing rate. There's a particular logic behind working the discounting factor. For the sake of brevity, for the sake of simplicity, just understand that discounting factor is the rate that the investor is looking at, right? Zomato is a highly risky business. Therefore, the discounting factor is high. Investors' expectation is high. Zomato is only captured around 12% of the Indian market share. Well, only 12%, but all of us think that they thrive. If Zomato is capturing 22% market share, imagine the valuation. So I am putting money into Zomato with the hope that it'll capture one day 22% of the market share. The rate of return, the rate of interest that the investor wants is quite high. That's the discounting factor. Infosys is again a very solid company, right? Because I have my money in Infosys because they regularly pay me dividends. Okay. But the fact is that the discounting factor that Infosys will use for its valuation will be quite low, because it's a stable business, not risky business. Okay. You have already giants operating in IT in that sector, and they are a company which has been in the sphere for many years. Right? So they've already captured the market. So investing again into Infosys is not a investor's call again. So what I'm trying to tell you is that an investor would expect a higher percentage from Zomato. That's why the discounting factor is quite high when compared to a company like Infosys or Wipro. So this is the percentage that you use to find out the discounted value. So what do? You apply this discounting factor to your free cash flows, and you arrive at the present value. You arrive at the present value or the discounted free cash flow value. You add up all the present value, you add up, say, you add up year one, year two, year three, year four, year five, add all the present value of your free cash flow. How do you get present value? By dividing by the percentage. You get the discounting rate, you get the discounted cash flows, you get the present value. Tomorrow, if anyone is asking you, man, what is your present value? You tell her or him that it is the discounted value of my free cash flows. That's the business, that's the value of my business, right? Because today, if I sit down and analyze what will be the value of my business 10 years down the line. So you're building the projection and you're discounting it to year zero, and you're getting the value today. And then you can work out different key metrics and ratios and all that. You can work out your GP ratio, you can work out your NP ratio, you can work out your ROI. What is ROI? The very famous return on investment. Simple terms, there are so many formulas to arrive at this, but ROI is what is the value of investment after 10 years, that is the present value now, minus the initial value. Today you're putting in 200 crores. Sitting today, after 10 years, you'll get 400 crores. What is the difference? 200 crores. So what is the burn that you have achieved? What is the burn that you had in year one, in year zero, right? You compare that with what has become the value of the investment in year 5 or in year 10. That difference divided by cost of investment. That's the base, right? Because the initial value investment is nothing but the cost of investment. Into 100, you get the ROI percentage. So if you're saying that, I have invested 200, it's become 800, and my cost of investment is say 50, 60, 70 crores, you can work out a good ROI for your. There are different methods. I mean, if you go to different websites, they'll give you different formulas. Ideally, after 10 years, like today, you can work out what is your ROI. And that is what you should tell your investors, because one thing that they definitely ask you in their list of 20 questions is, what is ROI? I mean, what is your ROI? That you can work out after getting the projections. So some common questions that we have here. How do I justify my valuation? Well, like I told you, some investors, I mean, this is something that you cannot really, you don't have it in your control, right? You will include you'll work out all the projections, you will include everything into your pitch. And when you go there and face investor, he'll ask you, what is your net asset value? You'll be like, net asset, why? I worked out different valuation method. No. So how do I justify my valuation? If he is asking for the net asset value, tell him that no, sir, I'll show you how I arrived at this present value of my business. See my projection. Justify to him the growth rate in your revenue. Justify to him why you'll incur this much of expense. Tell him why you'll incur this much of profit, right? So each and every figure in your pitch, in your business plan, in your working, in your projection should have a background story. If you're saying that my revenue is going by 100% in year 5 from year 4, he'll ask you, justify it. Tell me. If that's convincing, he'll tell you, okay, your valuation is reasonable. Second is difference between a cash flow statement and a profit and loss statement. Very simple. Profit and loss statement, you would know by this time that it shows you what is your profit before and after tax, right? It involves a lot of non-cash elements like interest, like depreciation. Whereas a cash flow statement gives you what is your cash at the end of the month, at the end of the year, sorry. See, how do you become cash flow positive? Very simple. You get that initial investment, say out of 7.5 CR, one segregation you do for reserve, 2.5. So get the 2.5, you keep it in your bank account. In year 1, assume you make a profit. Okay, you add that profit to your cash reserve, it becomes cash flow positive. Year 3, again profit, add that, invest into the business. Year 4, add that, invest in business. If you incur a loss in between, it is okay because your cash flow is positive. When does your cash flow become negative? When you keep incurring losses. Because you must understand that profit after tax or loss is something that is derived after your revenue and after your expenses. It is in your hand. Right? So you're eligible to reinvest. Either you can distribute them as dividends to your equity shareholders, or you can reinvest that into this and see what happens. So you become cash flow positive when you become profitable. So these two statements are different. In cash flow statement, you take only the cash elements, right? Investments, cash coming in, cash coming out. In PL statement, you consider all items which are of revenue nature. Right. How do I determine future expenses? I already told you this, but again, your expenses can be divided into two. I'm sorry, I don't have a working to explain this, but just taking this example that if you have, let's say, 200 crores, 20 crores of expenses, you can distribute between what is fixed and what is variable. Fixed could be rent, a typical example. Variable could be salary, a typical example. You identify what are your fixed costs and your variable costs. And then what you do is that you find out in the next 5 years which element will be fixed, which element will be variable. And that is how you can formulate your total expenses. And that is how you can arrive at the profit or loss after reducing the sales from your revenue or your sales. Right. A few more slides to end this session. The last one, of course, is common mistakes to avoid, right, in your business plan. Now here, what happens is, when you take a business plan and pitch it to the investors, or when you go to the Shark Tank, okay, I'm sure you would have seen this show called Shark Tank. When you go to that table, not all investors are like. Some would be working in varied industries. Some will look at you and invest. Some will look at your PPT and invest. Some will look at your idea before it's formulated and invest. Some will look at your MVP, your product, your service and invest. Some will even look at your grammatical mistakes in your PPT and invest, and decide whether to invest or not. So it's quite relevant and important that you should make your business plan, your business pitch near to perfection. Okay, you do not have to inflate your idea. Stick to it. You do not have to beat around the bush. What is your idea and stick to it. Do not have vague goals. Do not have 13, 14 sources of revenue coming in. Have one to start with. With that, you can pitch 2, 3 more. So idea inflation is something that you should definitely avoid. Growth projection, like I told you, have a justification for the growth rate. You should follow the traditional business plan method. Why? Because you should have a breakup of all the projections. Have an Excel sheet. Ask your consultant or your chart account to give you the Excel sheet. Because when thing comes up, you can't, you instead of saying something else in the pitch, you can always refer back to the Excel sheet. The investors will understand that. So always make sure that your growth rate is realistic. Assumption. I've somewhere heard that when you go to investors, even before they look at your projections, they will see what are the assumptions you have made. Okay, this is the growth rate. This is the market share. This is the revenue model. They will look at your assumptions first. They'll give you a few minutes to analyze your assumptions and tell them, is this really worthwhile or not? Is this realistic or not? So when you make assumptions in your business, right, you are saying that you will grow to 100% from year 4 to year 5. There should be a justification for it. There should be an assumption for it, and it should be realistic, right? So investors look at your assumptions more than they look at your revenue these days. Inadequate research, a common mistake. Okay, you can have a flamboyant PPT prepared by an expert. You can have all different types of colors coming in. But the problem is that you may not know how much of market share you will garner. Like I told you earlier, when you go forward and meet an investor, you should have some start to end your plan. Tell him that, sir, this is my exit strategy. Do research, because unless you do your homework, you will not be able to counter his questions, because these guys are people who have already invested or investing, and what all that they're looking for is to build the entrepreneurship favor in this country, and to get some kind of an ROI from their investors. Do not claim that you don't have a competition. Like I said earlier, competition is very important. Okay, my logic of no personal competition will not work in this startup world. Let the competitor be there. Embrace competition. Tell him that, sir, I know that this guy is a big player. He has huge supply chain, but it's okay. I will convince him to buy me after 5 years. So the investor is okay, fine. Investor is happy that, because at the end of 5 years, when the big person is buying the small person, investor will get back his return when he's exiting. So never claim that you don't have a competition. SWOT analysis. In that you have weaknesses. Many startups say that this is my weakness, and all that. Competition is definitely a weakness. You take any sector. The word competition should definitely come into your SWOT analysis. So have a competition analysis. You analyze in the market as to who are your competitors, what are their discount rates, what are their projections, etc. And embrace competition. Tell them that you are looking forward for a buyout. That was the end of my. That is the end of my presentation. Am. I think I've covered all the topics. If there's something that I've missed out, you can always ask me. Okay, I have given my contact number as well. So I would, it'll be great, and I'll be grateful if you can be in touch with me. You can mail me, phone me, or even, drop in a message in my website, in the firm's website. Yes. Any questions? We'll take up questions now. Divya?
Thanks a lot, Deepak. So everyone, let's get our, thinking caps on. Any questions that you have? We have another 20 minutes before Deepak leaves, so we have a lot of time. In the meantime, I have a couple of questions. The main difference between angel investors and VCs, just so that our startup entrepreneurs know. Do they also get involved in the business, or is it just funding?
They definitely get involved in business because they are
So the
equity
day-to-day, is it angel
Definitely.
investors do it also, or only VCs?
So both angel and VCs. Well, it depends on the stake that you're diluting to them, but definitely they are involved in the day-to-day decision making because they are equity financiers. If you say banks and NBFCs and people who do debt financing, they're only worried about the interest payments. So both investors, they take, to an extent, they are involved in your day-to-day.
Okay, and do they offer any mentoring, or do they offer
Definitely. You have this angel networks that are spread across the country.
Yeah.
They provide mentorship also, like how an incubator does. But their main job is to provide investment. So even venture capitalists, I was mentioning about Kalari. They have a platform where you come on board, you get mentored, and you are allowed to pitch in front of them. If they're your mentors, you're allowed to pitch in front of them. And if they find you are suitable, they'll invest in. So they do offer mentoring sessions.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm asking this question on behalf of most of the entrepreneurs here. What are the acceptable ways to channel your funding? I get say 1 million or 7.5 crores. What are acceptable ways? Can I use it for my cash flow? Can I use it for my payroll? Or is it a better use of my funds, utilization of my funds, if I say R&D, or is it everything equal?
It depends on the nature of your startup. If you're a capital intensive person, then you must draw in some money into your inventory, into buying machinery. If you are a service oriented person, then buying of licenses, software, hiring, payroll, etc. comes into picture. So the developing the product, developing the service, R&D, of course, is the main item in which you should invest. But in addition to that, you have several other areas depending upon what is your nature. If you're capital intensive, then you go for inventory machines. If you're not, you can go for marketing and sales and advertising. So it's not equal. Okay. It depends on it's at different proportions.
So I can use those funds for operating expenses.
You can use it, yes, because in the initial year, definitely you have to use it. Then you'll be generating revenue out of it. You'll be making profits. You can reinvest that for year 2, 3, 4, etc. To generate the initial revenue, you need that funding for your operating expenses.
Got it. That's all I have. Ladies?
I think I stopped a bit early.
Oh, there, you got the first question.
How to convince the investor if the product is existing in the market already and there are competitors. Okay. How can we frame our MOAT? Can you explain what MOAT is? Sorry, I'm not able to understand that. Can our focus market be the MOAT? What is the MOAT? So the second question, I'll come back to the first one later. In a bootstrapped venture at a later stage, if we bring in a co-founder, how do we decide the amount of equity that we should dilute, right? Yes. So I did not touch upon this, but it is generally covered. So let's say year 4, right? You want to bring in someone else because A startup generally means that for the first 10 years, you are a startup, right? From year 5 or year 6 or year 7, you are bringing in one more partner, one more co-founder. You need to do a valuation in year 4, right? I'm not talking about projections. I'm talking about realistic figures. You have surpassed year 0, year 1, year 2, year 3. You are sitting in year 4. How do you determine what will be the value of your share so as to attract the co-founders, right? So what you do is you draw a valuation, assuming year 4 is your year 0, and then extrapolate from year 4, so that you can find sitting at year 4 what is your present value, and based on that you can divide by the number of shares and find out this is the per share value. So you can tell the co-founder that, look, this is the value of my business sitting in year 4. This is the value of my share sitting in year 4. So why don't you come join my team? Okay, MOAT as in, I hope I was able to answer the first question. MOAT as in our USP, let me just open that. Okay, USP, the competitive advantage to preserve the market share. So like I told you, if you already, you have a product line, it is existing and you want to approach the investors, what they normally ask is that, how will you deal with your competitors? So like I told you, you need to do a competitive analysis, something similar to how you do projections. Like you need to go to, let's say, money.com, right? And see this particular company, what is the PL, what is the ROI, what is the discounted rate? Draw out comparatives, right? Work out your figures, compare it, and then tell the investor how you are different from this. If suppose all the figures are in favor of the bigger person, tell the investor that I embrace competition. I'm looking for a merger. I'm looking for an acquisition. Okay, so that is how you can approach investors when you already have competition that you face. If our product is a first mover in the market, we don't have a similar product to valuation. So this is how do we convince investors about forecast predictions? Then also going to do a valuation. Okay, so pre-revenue startup. Okay. So for valuation, definitely you don't need a product already. Like valuation is applicable for all stages of the startup. Whether you are in the incubation stage, in the validation stage, or in the scaling stage, or the exit stage. At every stage, there should be a valuation done. See, today I'm getting a valuation done. After 31 days, I have to get a valuation done if I have to, tell someone this is the value of my share. So at that point of time, you really don't need the criteria is not that your product should be established first, then go for valuation. No, because the indicators for valuation is revenue, expenses, profit, and these are items you can derive with your idea. I mean, definitely when you pitch, you'll find out about the market share. You will see that this is my growth rate. 10 years down the line, this is how much my revenue will grow, assuming the product is up and running.
I just want to add to that question because this came up in last year's Thai Women Global Finals. So this lady actually was the second runner-up. She was from Egypt, and she has introduced an e-commerce platform to bring all the farmers together. And Egypt being digitally a little backward, she didn't have any competition, so to speak. So what she did with the revenue projections was she took a comparable country where there was another platform existing. So instead of comparing her growth projections at Egypt to, say, the US, or if someone else had a platform for e-commerce for farmers to bring their produce and sell it, she's picked another country from the Middle East. I don't remember the name of the country. And so it was comparable. There was similar population, similar, and she showed how they had grown, the percentage that had grown in the last 3 years. And that is how she came up with her projections. It was very well thought out, very well researched. And so that's one way. If you don't have any competition in your country, the investors are all global investors. So they are looking at things at a global level. So they do need some perspective on have you really thought through it. So if it can happen, say, in Sri Lanka, maybe it can happen in Bangladesh, then it can happen in India. So they're looking at have you thought through your typical target market and how they think, how the ecosystem is.
You can never say that you don't have competition, because it will be there somewhere.
Yes.
So,
but this was, in a way, you could say, in Egypt, there was no other platform, digital platform to bring farmers together. So it could be true, but the way she convinced the
The
investors
investors.
was fantastic.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good. So, because there's no fixed method for valuation, it's not written anywhere. There's no section, there's no rule anywhere that says that you should apply this. They give an illustrative list of the different methods of valuation, and they tell that for a capital intensive, this could be a better. For an asset intensive company, this could be better. For a service oriented company, this could be better. Normally, it's discounted cash flows, but I think what she did was that she prepared a working for herself initially, and to get a comparison, she brought in the figures and she compared the two. And yes, that's a good way you can also pitch to investors. Definitely. Like I was telling you about Facebook and WhatsApp, they brought in no competition because that time WhatsApp had nothing. They had no competition, right? Now we're talking about different platforms coming up. So internally, they worked out a valuation saying that $1 per user, this is the value, and they acquired it. WhatsApp. Any more questions? Anything else? If safe note applicable in India, if no, then there is anything similar that we can do for MVP stage. Now, what is safe note? I would want to ask you. What is safe note? Can you give me? I would like to understand what it is. I can understand what MVP is, minimum viable product. Simple agreement for future agreement. Okay. Are you trying to say that, okay, future equity, fine. So you're saying that is it applicable for India? If no, then is there anything similar that we can do? Okay, okay, fine, I got it. So you're saying that instead of diluting equity, can you raise funds? That's what you're trying to say, right? Okay. So like I mentioned in previous slides, definitely you have debt financiers, right? You have people who give you loans. In fact, I'm not able to give you the example, but there is a plethora of venture capital investors who do debt financing. They don't want a stake in your, let's say crowdfunding. Normally Keto and you have these apps called platforms called Keto and Catapult and all that. They have crowdfunding platforms built over mainly for social costs, but they also cater to startups as well. So they don't ask for a stake in your capital, right? In your control. They don't ask you for dilution or anything. You have debt financiers also. You have banks, you have NBFCs. You can apply for different government loans also. So you need to identify which investor you need to approach. If you want to approach a equity financer, you should be ready to dilute. Otherwise, you should be ready to dilute. You should give out some amount of your cash as interest savings. So yes, it is possible, very much possible, and there are venture capital firms or companies in India doing debt financing. They don't ask for stake dilution. More questions?
Actually, about angel investors, I have some doubts. Actually, I don't know much more regarding that, and I was not in the starting of the meeting.
Okay, no problem, ma'am.
So,
No, what do you want to know?
Actually, my doubt is that what is actually angel investors? You're saying that angel investors will be involved in our day-to-day activities. If they are funding, what would be the that is what they expect? If we are going to profit, what would be their share? And if we are going to yours, what would be their that is their share like that?
See that. See, you can. It's your call, right? They will put an offer to you. For 2 crores, I would like to take 10%. Would you want to dilute 10% of your stake? You are looking for 2 crores, but ask yourself whether you want to dilute 10%. Then you tell them, no, 5%, what is the investment? They'll say 1.5 CR. So there's no fixed percentage of the share capital that these guys will acquire and keep to themselves. No. It depends on how much you want to dilute. It could be 10%, it could be 20%, but if you're giving away 50%, then what is the idea of you starting up a company? Right? Don't come to angel investors, you come to friends and family. Your friend is asking you, I'll put in money, but I want 50% stake. It is your idea, your baby. If you're giving him 50% control, What is your stake in this? So angel investors, to an extent, they're involved in the day-to-day activities. The percentage of investment will determine upon the offer that they're putting to you across the table. It depends on the funds you want. Suppose you are in dire need of 7 crores, they would say 15%. Suppose you only need 2 crores, so 10% is fine. That is an agreement that is agreed through a term sheet between the startup and the angel investor. And day-to-day involvement depends on how much of control they're holding. If they're holding 40%, of course, they'll be more involved. If they're holding only 10%, then they'll be less involved.
If you want, I can add something to that.
Yes, sure.
Usually, when there is a venture capital agreement between the venture capitalist and an potential company or startup, what they usually have is an exit agreement, in which the venture capitalists will either agree to buy up the company or exit through IPO. There are multiple exit routes for the venture capitalists. That is always in 80% of the cases that is predefined.
Right.
In the inception of the agreement itself. For example, when you go to Paytm or any other, usually when Sequoia or the Chinese investment companies come into play, they'll put in the money with the agreement that when you go for IPO, you would sell off our share instead of the
Right.
promoters. Or another venture capitalist comes into play. You will offer our sales shares to them instead of you selling of yours.
In the order of priority, yes.
In the order of priority. And also, when it comes to NCDs, or there is a platform known as Tyke Invest. That is usually used by startups for raising funds. If you look at it, one of the projects I have invested in is a organic foods market that is based out of Mumbai. They are planning to expand into different regions, so they raise the funds through non-convertible debentures.
Debt funds, yes.
Debt funds.
Yeah.
So they also had option for common stock shares, but those common stock shares have differential rights in which I won't be able to vote. The primary decision making will lie with the promoter itself or the startup entrepreneur itself. I just give them the fund, but in return they will be liable to me in the extent that they are supposed to report to me what is happening every quarter.
Okay.
And have to get the books audited, proper reporting, valuation, wiring, answering to the investors.
Okay. Yes.
That's primarily what I just wanted to add on.
It's all agreed in the term sheet, in the agreement between you and the.
Everything is initially written down.
Yes. So how much of stake that you want to give up is based on how much of investment that you're looking for. Like I said, if you're looking for 10 CR, then there'll be a bit more. So they will calculate. I mean, they will give you an offer, and if you're happy with that, then you can take up. You can sacrifice that much of equity shares and take up that much of investment. So that is about when you were asking about agents. Thanks, Karthik, for that.
Sure.
Okay, so I think it's time I don't think there are any more questions, but there are, Deepak has been kind enough to share his phone number, his email. You may regret it, Deepak. We will hound you. So please do get in touch with him or get in touch with Divya or me. You can post the questions in WhatsApp. I can channel it to him and get the answers. And if there are enough questions, enough queries, we will arrange a follow-up. So thanks again, Deepak. It has been a fantastic 1.5 hours. It just flew by, very clear, very lucid, and gave us a basic understanding of what it is that we need to look for. So thanks again. And please feel free to leave, because I just want to talk to the Thai women applicants before they also leave. But thanks again so much. And if I could request all the Thai women applicants to stay back. just for 10 minutes. I have a couple of updates to let you know.
Right. Thanks, Revati. Thanks, Divya. Thanks, the entire Thai team.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
been
you,
great
Deepak.
talking to you.
Very, very informative session.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a great night. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.